Okay, guys, hello and welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today, this is part of a subsection of the program known as Wristwatch Rambles and Rants, which is a sponsored segment brought to you by Wrist Candy Watch Club. So, I'm trying to be as transparent as possible when it comes to sponsored segments. Essentially, yeah, I don't do paid reviews. I started this channel sharing watches that I bought, so I pretty much am still within the tradition of sharing and reviewing and showcasing things that I like, which doesn't make everybody super thrilled, especially when I don't want to review somebody's watch. But yeah, I review what I like, and part of that though is also making time to share my thoughts on non-review formats and do comparisons like this. So big shout out again to Wrist Candy Watch Club for supporting the channel. So if you want to support the channel as well, definitely check them out in the link. They're really known for their pretty colorful and basic standard NATO straps. As you can see here, there's a decent assortment of them. Very nice. But they even have some more high grade stuff that I'll pull into frame once we zoom out. But the point of today's video is going to be really just identifying the best entry-level Japanese dive watch, and there are different price ranges to it here. Some of these watches go from $400 to $500, while others go from $300 to $400, and then others $200 to $300. And honestly, are there cheaper watches out there? Yes, there absolutely are. But these are some of the best options. I mean, from legitimate brands that aren't just, not to say there's anything wrong with homage watches or anything like that. But I mean, there's something to be said for brands that do have some heritage, do have a little bit of lineage, and, they just are actual watchmaking brands versus, watch designers. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, now before we pull these up, let's very quickly, again, give you guys a shot of now some of Wrist Candy Watch Club's more premium strap options, which is something new. So just thought I'd share those with you guys. Very nice seatbelt style nylon there, of course, with the nice stitching and almost like engraved stitching, and then of course the much more serious hardware there, as you can see, all milled out. So very cool. Again, guys, Wrist Candy Watch Club, check them out. They're helping the channel. You guys seem to enjoy the channel you're on here right now. So check these guys out. I've done individual reviews for every one of these watches, guys. We have, of course, the Seiko Mini Turtle, we have the Orient Kamasu, and then we have this really great Citizen Promaster, which doesn't really have a nickname yet, just because it's honestly, isn't that mainstream, and probably what many of you, at least for me, what was holding me back from a lot of these Citizens with 8000 series movements was the lack of a hacking seconds function. But I'm happy to say that this one does have hacking seconds, so very cool. Now, in terms of the specs on these, they're all very similar. 200 meters of water resistance, even the size, crown location. I could easily see these watches being shopped against each other. One of the things that all of them have in common that you really won't find in something like a microbrand watch is they have shielded lume pips, which I really, really appreciate. Of course, none of these are going to have ceramic inserts, but one of them does have a sapphire crystal. This one is hardlex, this one is a mineral. But other than that, very close. Also, no day complication here, but you are going to be getting day complications on these two. This one is just going to be the date, but you also get a cyclops. So there's things that definitely differentiate this pair or triplet or trifecta of watches. And yeah, I think people do enjoy a good Japanese dive watch, and these definitely cover that, although the Kamasu is not ISO rated. Does Orient have ISO rated divers that are within this price range? They do. But, you know, the thing that makes this so compelling is the price point out of the group. But let's go ahead and start with the Seiko as kind of the daddy here. Of course, Seiko was founded back in 1881, Japanese in origin, and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover every market segment from low end and entry level all the way up to extremely, you know, hot horology levels. So this is the SBDY085 Mini Turtle, and this is the second gen, and you can tell that it's a second generation Mini Turtle, one because of the color combination, and two because it has the Lume pip there at the 3 o'clock that's been added to the outer track, as you can see there. So not super noticeable, but it does help in terms of ISO standards. So because that standard was recently updated, and I think it's a charmer. I think it's a great size at 42.3 millimeters. It is 12.6 millimeters thick and 43 only millimeters lug to lug, which is great. Mineral crystal magnification cyclops. You're getting a 120 click unidirectional bezel. Let's hear it. Ooh. Really nice bezel action on this one, honestly. Everything lines up as well, which is pretty mind-blowing. So as much as people want to get on Seiko, they still are putting up stuff like this. Lines up, even the chapter ring lines up. I mean, this thing just hits on all marks. I really, really enjoy this one. It's a beautiful wear, and I think it's very handsome and also very intrinsic to Seiko, which I really can appreciate. It has 20 millimeter lugs here, so perfect size in terms of that. And then you also do have solid end links, push pin connectors. You do have also a stamped divers extension, and then stamped folding section, stamped clasp, but it is push button, which is nice, and it does have a number of micro adjusts. Also, it has a nice taper to it, as you can see. Tapering down there, it is quite a balanced wear, and I can absolutely appreciate that. Now next is a real favorite, especially for, you know, us watch folks. This is the Orient Kamasu. In some places, depending on what region you're in, some might name this the Mako whatever, maybe the Mako 3. It's just something like that, or the Ray 2, 3. There's too much there in terms of the nicknames, but this is a really great piece. So while the Seiko was the top of the range in terms of price, being able to find that in between $400 and $500, here you have really the most affordable. You can get these for in between $200 and $300 depending on where you're shopping. Of course, they won't all have the kanji day wheel. This is just because I bought mine before the US market hit, so this is a JDM model. If you buy one, it will probably most likely have Spanish there, but it's a nice solid piece as well. I'd say the big difference here is you're going to be getting 22 millimeter lug, which isn't the greatest, and generally everything on here is going to be a bit softer, but it's going to be you know, price prohibitive. Also, instead of pin and collar connectors, you're going to be getting standard friction pins. For some, that might be a plus. You guys might say, oh, I don't want to deal with a pin and collar. If it's going to be pinned together, might as well just be a friction pin, so I don't have to worry about losing the collar. But this is at 41.5 millimeters and then 12.8 millimeters thick, and 46.8 millimeters lug to lug. It also has unidirectional rotating 120 click bezel. Let's hear that. Okay. Very smooth, similar to the Seiko in terms of smoothness. It just doesn't quite have the notchiness. And there's definitely just a touch more play, but it lines up, so can't be upset with that. Also, again, one thing that I love about these watches is they do have shielded Lume pips, which is fantastic. I really, really dig that. In terms of the bracelet, guys, this one is out of the group is the worst. It is stamped in in every way, and then it also even has hollow end links, which isn't great. And in terms of the links themselves, they're probably the lowest definition in terms of the milling and everything like that. These are all trying to look like multiple links, although if you look at even the back here is milled out accordingly, but this is just one solid link that's just been kind of milled down, and that's kind of the story and then tail of the tape for all of these. None of them are true multi-link bracelets. They're single link, just with some milling done to kind of do that to kind of give you that impression. But really great. This one's going to be a lot more traditional in terms of looks, so if you're somebody that is definitely into more of a sedate, more traditional look, but also very modern, this guy here could be the watch for you. One thing I will say is also with the wider means wider clasp. Some of you might find it balanced. Some of you might find it unrefined, but it's there. And then now, kind of the newcomer here, although Citizen as a brand is not new. Of course, Citizen, founded back in 1918 by Japanese and Swiss investors, eventually settled on the brand name of Citizen Watch Company around 1930, with Citizen Group owning Miyota, Belova, Arnold & Son, Frederic Constant, Alpina, and Campanola. So they do have quite a wide range as well. Orient's pretty much known for Orient, Orient Star, and some Royal Orient, while Seiko and Citizen have, pretty decent sized stable. And one thing I really enjoy about this particular piece, this is the Citizen Promaster NY0125-83 Echo, or E. It's a really cool, affordable mechanical diver. This one is right in the middle at in between $300 and $400. It has a 41 millimeter diameter, 39.8 millimeters thick, with 50.7 millimeters lug to lug. Of course, here another thing that's different is that you're actually going to have a 60 click bezel, which I really like. Wow, this is a really well done 60 click bezel. Feels very tactile, very notchy, but still quite smooth. This feels like a tool bezel, so very cool from that standpoint. And it's also quite handsome with, of course, the gilted it's the word I'm looking for, accents. The gilted accents, very nice. Also a JDM model, so you're going to see the kanji date wheel there. Hacking and hand winding. But I will say that in terms of the experience of these, in terms of movement, the Citizen feels the least refined. The 8000 series is quite a ways off from those 9000 series movements that we all know and love. So, I will have to share that in terms of the winding and setting of the time. It's just not the greatest, I would say. Out of these two, the Seiko has better winding action and just general operations, where the Orient feels a bit looser in comparison. And then probably to add insult to injury, the Citizen feels a little bit gritty and grainy from that standpoint, but by no means a deal breaker. Still a great timepiece, but when you're comparing it to these two watches with I think exemplary movements, of course there's going to be some things there that fall short, but some things on this Citizen really stand out. Like, check out this clasp, milled very nicely, and look at that, a diver's extension, and it's cool, toolless. And if you really needed to, you could extend that and make something fit your wrist a little bit better if you get swollen. So very cool from that standpoint. And I think where Citizen is really leading the way with this particular model anyway. Very cool. Also, this one is just going to be a mineral crystal. You know, nothing special, not like the sapphire you're going to find on the Orient or the Hardlex mineral proprietary blend that you're going to find on the Seiko. Yeah, these are just three great watches that I really enjoy, and yes, they are at different price points. If we want to put them in order, most expensive here with the Seiko, then coming in kind of second, about $100 down in range, and then $100 down from that, you're gonna get the Kamasu. Now, in terms of wearability, I think these are all great. I will say, of course, the Seiko pulls a lot of tricks, although it's the largest on wrist itself because of this really short lug to lug. And generally very small dial. It does feel probably the smallest on the wrist. Although these two are closer to 41 versus 42, these are going to just generally wear a little bit bigger. Some of it has to do with the longer lugs. Some of it has to do with the dial proportions. Also, thickness-wise, guys, these two watches, you can see they wear their thickness with pride. There's no trying to hide the thickness here. I mean, it's not overly thick, neither of these watches. You know, you have under 14 millimeters here on the Citizen and just under 13 millimeters on the Orient. But both of them really do feel quite hefty and substantial, which is good for a mechanical watch. But for a tool watch, it's definitely nice when you have something like this Seiko here, as you can see, where it is only 12.6 millimeters by comparison, so slightly thinner than the Orient, but it actually wears a lot thinner as well, just because of the case contours and just some of the general, I'd say just the word I'm looking for. It's really early in the morning when I'm filming this right now. Proportions. Some of the proportions just help slim this down. And, you know, everybody knows Seiko is really known for just being able to pull out all the stops. One thing I do also want to show you guys is the fit and finish. Look at this polish transition here. It is absolutely fantastic between the brushing on the tops of the lugs and the polishing on that undercut. It's just gorgeous, guys. That is outstanding. Also, look at the detail work on that bezel for gripping there, the brushing, the polish, the angles, all very, very impressive. Now, by a stark contrast, when you, let's say you were to look at the Orient, guys, here's where you see that the money was saved. Look at that. It's just very, very soft by comparison. The transition is quite soft. Just the general shape you can see, although it is highly polished there, there's a lot of distortion just because it's just not a flat surface. It's just very rounded there, and you can see the way the light kind of plays with that. Also, you can see comparatively when you look at that bezel in terms of the grips there, you know, it's a lot more basic. It's just it's just polished all the way around, which isn't the greatest for grip. Versus here, you're gonna get a brushing, and then it's polished kind of on the insides of these grips here. So falls short definitely from that standpoint, but then you look here, a little bit more comparable. The brushing on this Citizen is outstanding, so look at that. I have to say that is very impressive brushing. Let me give it a quick wipe, guys. Very, very nice from that standpoint. Yeah, that's impressive. The bezel is all polished, so nothing special from that standpoint. It did have really great action, a little taller kind of on this top hat side. And then you can see that the crystal is semi-protected because it's somewhat inset when you compare it to where the bezel kind of aligns there on the most outer edge. But here you're going to see somewhere middle of the class from that standpoint. And honestly, some places I feel like the brushing and the satin finish on these Citizens is very nice. And maybe even a touch ahead of Seiko's brushing. The difference I would say is that Seiko does a really good job with the transition there between brushed and polished. This particular watch really doesn't allow Citizen to show, you know, their best in class from a fit and finish perspective, because it is all predominantly brushed, so you're not going to see those transitions. Here the Orient is going to be a bit let down within those transitions. Nothing wrong with the brushing, totally fine. Nothing really wrong with the polishing. The transition isn't great, and then just the general softness in the case there, you can see it just feels much finished to a lower tolerance, if you will. So with all that said, guys, we haven't even got these on wrist, so let's go ahead and all right, we'll start with the Kamasu. As you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, sorry about that, it wears really well. It doesn't really feel overly thick. It looks very traditional, and those wider lugs do a certain job, I think, of kind of shrinking the watch and making it flow a certain way and feel a bit more tool-like and more substantial. So although I would prefer a 20mm with a nicer taper X and X, I'd say this does give it a, you know, a very signature look and feel. Still great range of mobility, you know, that lack of a heavy dramatic taper. Some people might like that. They might see this side profile and go, oh, that's the kind of watch I need for me. Of course, it does limit range of mobility when you do have something a little bit thicker there at the bottom of your wrist as well. But it does drape really nicely, hugs the wrist. You can see lugs do turn down quite well, and it is very legible and very handsome. That shade of blue that they're using is really, really well chosen. So really great from that standpoint. Let's go ahead and move on to the Citizen. All right, guys, as you can see, the Citizen wears really, really beautifully as well. A little bit longer on the lug, especially with those male end links there that do protrude, but they do slope, so they don't stick out in an awkward way. I will say that when you're looking at it head on, those male end links aren't going to be a real issue. It's going to be when you have it at an angle, you're going to go, oh, wow, that's kind of looks like the middle finger. So, but this watch is going to wear a bit taller, and a lot of that does have to do with the proportions of that top hat bezel there. As you can see, it just sits above and on top of the case in a way that isn't as integrated as you'll see from some of the other watches that are here. But that brushing is immaculate, really, really impressive from that standpoint. Really digging that. And as you can see, looks great. Go ahead and turn it here. A little bit taller. You're going to get a bit more of a taper, which is nice. And then, of course, you do have this great adjustable clasp, which is wonderful and obviously very useful if you're going to go diving, but also useful in terms of adjusting for, you know, any type of variation in the heat and swelling. Taking any of those things into account is really nice to have that option. And honestly, typically you're going to pay a lot more for something like this. And, you know, again, it's solid. It has the, you know, the milled folding section and everything like that. Now, Citizen does do kind of a cheaper version of this, an older version, but I gotta say that you know, for something again that's, you know, around $400 or less, in between $300 and $400, this is quite a catch for the money. I think it's really great. It captures that vintage big crown kind of aesthetic. It has the gilded you know, vintage-esque aesthetic as well, so very handsome. And then at the end of the day, it's a Citizen, which is going to garner more brand recognition than something like an Orient, and you know, some might even hold Citizen in higher regards than a Seiko, depending on kind of where they are within their collecting journey. But let's go ahead and move on to the Seiko. All right, guys, as you can see, the Mini Turtle, come on, this thing is sweet. It's just like, why buy a Doxa at this point? I'm a big fan of the Mini Turtle, and I think it's a really underappreciated watch. You can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, you're getting really great great look. And then even when I get really close and there can be some lens distortion and whatnot, it still doesn't feel oversized or look oversized. When you look at the profile there, those great undercuts offer nice mobility. Also, because you're getting 20mm lug versus 22, it comes to a bit of a thinner clasp, which is nice. And it does feel really quite balanced, which is great, I'd say, in terms of kind of wearability. The Seiko shines, but I think, you know, those of you who know Seiko watches are really known for their ergonomics. So this thing is no different. It absolutely takes a lot of those best practices and really showcases them. Also, you're going to see that great magnifying cyclops there. One thing I really like about it is that it's a complete circle. I think it looks really natural, almost like a droplet of water on there, and really ties into the theme. You can see this watch is meant to be functional, not super over stylized or anything like that, which is nice, because Seiko do some pretty extreme looking divers, and they do some pretty classic looking everyday divers as well. And this is somewhere in the middle, I'd say. It has a lot of personality, but it's far from boring. So with that said, let's go ahead and actually get into some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. All right, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, these watches stand up. I would say the only reason why the Kamasu might be paling in comparison is because it is next to two absolute Lume beasts. And one of the cool things about the Citizen is that it's actually using a more green colored compound versus their typical blue, cool blue hue. You can see that the Seiko is its traditional Lume Bright, which is a really nice shade of green that does have kind of a different hue to it depending on where you're at. But yeah, these all look outstanding. You can see there it's really probably a question of the Lume application that really makes a difference here. You're going to see much thicker application on the Seiko and the Citizen, whereas the Orient is going to be, you know, a little bit more stylized within those indices. So it's just not going to have quite the same level of pop. But one thing I do like to do within these Lume shots is work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to be coming in and out of a building, you know, walking underneath an overhang, the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So you're not always going to be within optimal lighting. And, you know, although my studio lights here do a good job of kind of rendering direct sunlight, I also like to get into some very harsh, high contrast lighting situations, just so you guys can see, you know, look at the way the light is gliding off of the brushing there. Typically this would expose any type of imperfections. In this case, you're probably just going to see a little bit of wear and tear from watches that have been worn, you know, and well loved. You can see also the light play on the crystal for that Citizen, because it does have a bit of a dome to it on the outside. Really, really great, versus the more flat angles you're going to be getting on the crystals for the Orient and the Seiko. And you can also see that the way the light is held, look at the light on the matte finish. Also, it's black, right? On the Seiko, it can go out to these really cool high contrast, I should say low contrast grays. But when you go over the Citizen, because of its more glossy nature, it definitely stays blacker, darker, and inkier at more times. And then if it takes a direct, you know, kind of blast there, a little solar flare action, it'll just white out before it necessarily goes gray. And then, of course, the king of the light show in the center there, center stage, with the Kamasu and that beautiful, vibrant sun ray dial, which is great. I think I like that it has that really high contrast where it's deep dark blues, almost black, and then you see those little narrow strips of blue just kind of jut out and connect with that bezel insert, which also look great. In terms of the Lume rendering colors, guys, you can see the whitest Lume in daylight is going to be more of that Seiko, and then you're going to get kind of more greenish yellow hues in direct light here for the Orient and the Citizen. But let's go ahead and get the lights back on all together. So out of these three watches, which one is my pick? It's a tough call. Obviously there are different prices, different price points. If somebody was able to just offer me this, have one of these watches for free, of course I'd take the most expensive one, which is the Seiko. But it's not to say that I don't like the other ones. I mean, geez, I came out of pocket on the other ones too. It's not like Orient or Citizen were in some type of rush to go get me product to review. These are watches that I purchased on my own. And I really enjoy them both. And I stay all three. So they're really great. It's tough though, I will say. If somebody was to ask me what I recommend, I'd recommend they look at these three. Yes, I do enjoy a good micro brand, etc. And I also enjoy Swiss watches as well. But I think these Japanese, heavyweights right here, they just swing and just they play and live way outside of the standard, which is, I think, really cool. And these watches just offer so much in terms of not being timepieces, but also being conversation pieces, because not a lot of people know about these particular units. Yes, they're popular within the watchosphere and the WIS community, for those watch idiot savants out there, but your average person, even if they recognize the name Citizen or Seiko, they won't recognize these particular models, and they should, because they're so good. Again, all of these watches are under 500 bucks. Some of them are well under $500, right? So, and then you start taking into account maybe secondary markets, or there can be flash sales, this and that. If any of these models, well, one of them did already, this Orient is on Joma Shop, so I mean, you can reliably get that watch very, very cheap. So there's a lot of fun options out there, and yes, there are options like the Invicta Pro Diver, which for about $100 can give you almost everything you're getting here, apart from the true Japanese heritage, and that side of it. Invicta can kind of get you a revival Swiss kind of heritage, which is fun. But generally none of their watches really look like their brand anymore. These watches scream and shout their brand identity and their design language. So I really dig that. And yes, the Citizen has a Mercedes hand, but guess what? The watch that it is, paying tribute to also had a Mercedes hand. So can't really get too mad from that standpoint. Also had a little arrow hand there on the minute. So really interesting. I guess I didn't even talk about the handsets. There's just so much to cover, guys. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I know this was a long video. If you liked the video, please do it like. If you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. And guys, don't forget to check out Wrist Candy Watch Club. These guys, thank you. I thank you. I thank them. So otherwise I'd be sleeping right now still, but instead I'm making this great video for you guys because I do have a certain level of paid motivation to put out more content, even apart from just the standard reviews that I have in queue, which I do have more in queue, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. So again, if you did enjoy the video, why don't you hit subscribe and check out more from the channel. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks, guys.